Welcome to Project Management Hardcore, Episode 5. Yes, we're at Episode 5. Let's head over to at PM Hardcorp on Twitter, at PMHARDCORPS, so we can look at the diagrams. What we're going to do on this episode is obviously review last week what we did, and then we're going to show you the transition to increment diagrams, and then show you how we present all this work we did during meetings. Remember, one of the great things that comes out of this is while you're doing the scope diagram, while you're doing the work breakdown structure, every one of those bubbles, every one of those boxes in the WBS, work breakdown structure, every one of them is discussed. People are thinking about them, and they're thinking about the details. And you're writing things down. You're writing definitions. I haven't showed you, but don't forget this part of it. When you do the scope diagram, you also do a table, either in Excel or in Word, whatever you prefer, and you number all the bubbles once you're done with it. Number all the bubbles in the scope diagram and also those out of scope, and you define them. Define them on that list in Word or Excel. And the first column will be the number. The second column will be the narrative that you actually have in the bubble. And the third column is a description, a definition of what that means to everybody. And everybody obviously reads that and agrees on it. And you're all on track, all on the same page. Sometimes I add another column, as a reference, what we're referring to, whether it's a memo or a law or a federal regulation if it's an agency, or a contract with a customer if it's commercial, etc. And then I sometimes also add another column to show who's responsible for that. So once you have that scope diagram done, you've got everything in the scope, everything out of scope, and as I showed you on some of them, the risks are already there. Well, then you define them all in the list. Everybody agrees on that, and the risks you still leave there until you, after you do the WBS. Then you start on the WBS. So jump over to the Twitter site, and let's go to media, right? And scroll down. So click on the media and scroll down until you get to E3. Well, let's open up E3 for now. So remember, every one of these bubbles has been defined. The risks you don't have to do now. You'll define them later in the risk registry or however your company or agency stores risks. And the gray bubbles on the left are all those things out of scope, and everything in the big circle is in scope. The yellow bubbles, I just actually, during that one episode, I was trying to say, I wanted to try to get your attention to those to show those left. Those are out of scope, and I told the story of how they became out of scope. And also in the WBS, we saw that as well. So, close that, and let's scroll up a bit. And remember, as you see all these diagrams, every one of these diagrams, the folks on the project and the stakeholders have had a discussion about every single thing there. And that is really tremendous. It keeps the project in focus. And plus, when people do these diagrams and you're working with them during these meetings, everybody feels like they're part of it. It brings the team together. They have buy-in. They have a say. And everybody is clear about that. So, what we've done, if you look at, scroll to, let's start from the top and then we can go down. And you can pass obviously the tweets on there. And the first thing we come to is E2, and then E3, and E4, and E5, E6. Those were the work breakdown structure I described. Last one, E9, keep going, E10, and E3 we just looked at. So we do E3, and then obviously go up. WBS 10, the work breakdown structure, we do that. Now, just keep both of those without opening them so you can see E3 and you can see WBS 10. And E10 is on top and E3 is on the bottom. Once we're done with all that, once we have all the definitions for all the bubbles in the scope and all the boxes in the work breakdown structure, now someone on their laptop or workstation has the Visio scope diagram open. Someone else has the work breakdown structure diagram open on their workstation. And now you start with a bubble in the scope diagram, and you read the definition, and someone finds that deliverable for that that bubble that describes the scope in the work breakdown structure. If you find it quickly, it could be more than one. You highlight them in yellow, highlight the box in yellow, and I'm using the E3 and W and E10 to show you. Obviously, you can highlight the boxes. And then you go on to the next one and the next one. Now, when you get to the end, if there's something in the scope that you don't have a deliverable for, then you got to discuss that and figure out why. If you have a deliverable and you don't have a scope bubble, you have to discuss that and figure out why. Someone could have made a mistake. Maybe it's not in the scope. Maybe you don't need that deliverable. It's not a deliverable that's part of this project. Or maybe the deliverable couldn't be part, or maybe it's not in the scope, but you go back and forth. Once you've gone through all of them and they're all yellow, that's the end of your quality check. So think about it. You went two different ways. You talked about scope. What is in the scope of this project? What is out of the scope? And then you close that diagram, like I told you on the last episode, and now you've done work breakdown structure, and it's a different question. What are we delivering? What are the deliverables of this project? And it's a different way to think, and everybody's thinking a different way. So you go through that, and then you match them up. So people went from two different directions, thinking about it two different ways to get it all out on these diagrams. The thought process, the discussions, the meetings to get this done, they just allow you to get a great grasp on the project. And not only you, but everybody on the team, the core team, the stakeholders, and everybody agrees. So at that point, after you've done the quality check, and you could, when you find discrepancies, you may have to call a stakeholder. You may have to call somebody and figure it out. But at this point, at the end of that, you've got your stakeholder list. You've talked to everybody on there. You've got your scope diagram. You've got your work breakdown structure. And remember, you're going to get the sign-offs for these. So everybody agrees. So when upper management says, yes, I agree that this is in your scope and these things are out of your scope. Now, can that change later? Yes, but they'd have to go through a change process. So if someone says, this should be in your scope as well, okay, it's not now. So this project is, let's say, 12 months. And we'll do the analysis. And if you think it should be in the scope, we'll tell you how much longer, how much more money it'll cost, how many more resources we need. But if you've already figured out that that scope and that work breakdown structure is a year, let's just throw a number out, 10 million a year, and these many resources. Well, what they add could add 6 months, could add another 5 million, right? And you may need twice the resources. So once you present that to upper management, say, hey, it's going to add another 5 million, it's need more resources, and it's going to take another 6 months, or whatever I said a moment ago, then they may say, no, that's not part of the scope. But you should know whether or not it's part of the scope even before you get there. Because if the meetings are different, if these are different people, if it's not the same thing you're doing. Remember I discussed that, for the data center project, you were physically moving equipment. And that one application was actually not moving. They were shutting it down there, decommissioning, get rid of the equipment. They were buying new servers to set up at one of the two locations you were moving to. So that's not part of your project. That's not a physical move. It's a whole different thing. So that, when you see in E3, those are the bubbles that left. And I think someplace in the work breakdown structure I showed you those as well last week. But understand, you have defined the project both in diagram and either in Word or Excel. You've written all the definitions. And so now you're set to go. You've done your quality check. Everybody's on the same page. You've got your stakeholders. And now you move on to the next step. So, the next step. Let's scroll down. Actually, let's scroll up. So scroll to the top of media, and you'll see P3 past that, P2 past that. We'll discuss those. P1 past that. And let's go all the way to, let's see, just make sure, E8. So let's go to E8. So click on E8 so you can see it, and it'll come up. So in another tab in Visio, you have these headings. Planning, could be procurement, what you have to procure. If you're not procuring anything, you don't need that. In this data center move, we needed that. Increment 1, increment 2, increment 3, increment 4. These days, it's probably build 1, build 2, build 3, build 4. And I showed you in the demos earlier, in the earlier episodes, how each one of those builds could break up into sprints. But let's just look at this first, okay? So planning, let's go down. We got a plan for the security escorts. Now, how did these bubbles get here? I copied all the bubbles from the scope diagram and moved them onto this new page, new tab in Visio, had them on the bottom, and then I started moving them up to where they belonged, or I thought they belonged. Now, the thing is, it's so easy because if you don't get it right the first time, you just highlight the bubble, move it to where it should be. You don't have to retype. You don't have to do anything. It's almost like playing a game. It's easy. It's as easy as that. You just move it to where it needs to be. And same thing. While you're doing this, you've got your core team. You've got some stakeholders that, have the knowledge here. And you're moving it, and everybody is agreeing. So remember, this is the data center move. Let's look at some of the things in planning. Network architecture design, that's got to be the right part of planning. Windows domain architecture design. Let's go down the middle row. Identify the stakeholders. Okay, that was part of my planning. That stakeholder list, I showed you what that looked like, and that's done. Plan the logistics resources. Identify warranty and maintenance providers. So all this is part of planning. Under the procurement, you can see those things we have to procure. WAN circuit procurement. Procure beachhead for Z. Now remember that was gone in some sense for that particular. Oh, I'm sorry. No, keep going down. The yellow bubble. XYZ server purchase. That was gone. That left the project. On the left, those yellow bubbles, that's why I have them in yellow so you can see, that was gone. That left the scope of the project because it wasn't a physical move. These folks didn't need me or anybody else. They purchased new servers, they put them there, and they installed their software and transferred the data. So why would that be part of my project? So that's why it's highlighted in yellow there. But you can see the other things we procured, the MDBPUs, the power, upgrade some of them, network equipment, etc. And you can see procure network equipment for Z and network equipment for X. So that was there. So now, whatever was in the scope for procurement, there it is, under one list, right? So when you put it in your project plan, you just take it from here. Increments. Increment 1, verify equipment is working before power down. There it is on the right. Build the beachhead in Z for the piece of software, the application XYZ. Well, that was gone. Once again, it wasn't a physical move. Gone. But you could see how easily it becomes clear when you do something like this. In a visual format, in images, it becomes clear. Increment 1, procure network for X, procure network cabling vendor. So that's now, remember, procurement is, you're just trying to get an idea on the left there, the column there, you get an idea what you got to procure, and now you can repeat it, so where you're going to do it. Increment 1 is actually the processes you're going to do, and of course, some of these will be the headings, and you'll have all the tasks under there in order to get these things done. Disconnect all equipment. Migrate video conferencing. Prep the racks for shipment. Offload racks, etc., etc. So just read down there. You can stop my talking here for a while and just read them all. Let's look at increment 2. Now, increment 2 is to go to X, right? So that's to go to this particular new data center. And of course, you list, once again, you list all the applications, but they're in your scope, so you just move them in the right place. Where are you going to do it? So these are the ones we're moving in increment 2. And some of these things are notes. Look, second row on the right. Owner brings, on the very right, owner brings power up equipment and brings the system up. So that's something you want to remember, that this is how we're going to do it. The owner is going to power up. The owner is going to bring up the application, the owner of the app, at the site once it's moved, correct? So you can also put notes here. And you're going to see these notes show up in some of the presentations. So while you're discussing these things, just because this bubble is part of the scope, you can add another bubble so to keep things that you talked about and came up, you don't lose any of them, right? So you could see every single one application is there. Migrate, second one down from the left. Migrate D4V to X, 3 racks. Migrate F6T to X, 1 rack. You got the racks there, which may change later on. And they did, actually. You know, people didn't have, some folks didn't know exactly how many racks they had, because how many times, you know, they hadn't been to the data center, and once it's set up, they run everything from, you know, a workstation or something and move on. So you can see all that in increment 2, but you could see how, think about how easy this was. I just copied and pasted the bubbles in this other tab with those column titles and moved them around, moved them to where they should be. Try doing that. Try going straight to Microsoft Project and doing something like that. Very difficult. So now here we got planning, procurement, increment 1, and increment 2 to X. Close that. That was E8. Let's jump to E9, which is right above it. And now you see there's increment 2 to Z. Increment 3 to Z. And you can see that's everything that's migrating to the other data center. Migrate A26 node 1 to Z, 1 rack. Migrate B25 node 1 to Z, 1 rack. Verify systems are operational, which is in the scope. Migrate C24 to Z, 1 rack. Prep the racks for shipment, etc., etc. And if there's anything different that you're doing for one data center than another, that would be there. Increment 4, other location. So data center brings power up equipment and system up. Migrate 1A1 to other location, 3 racks. And look who's doing that, the owner, right? Turn systems power up, the owner. This was the other location that we talked about, and in the beginning of the project, if you scroll down, you see move racks to truck and transport. Well, that didn't happen. They did that. They had to move because the other location was on the other side of the country, and that wasn't in our budget. Okay, and as you can see, it was one system. Migrate 1A1 to other locations. So it was only one system. If they had decided to come to X or Z, they'd have been in my project. We'd have done all that. But once they decided to go someplace else, then it was up to them. Now, in some situations that may work, in some it may not. But it'd be difficult. You'd have to have all separate meetings. So every other system you're moving is going to X and Z, and this one system is going across the country someplace else. Again, that would be meetings just with them. And that just shows you, well, that's not in my scope. They can come along with us, but otherwise they need to do their own thing. Increment 5, excess equipment. Identify excess equipment, decommission equipment, dispose of excess equipment. Obviously, once you've vacated most of the current data center, then you start figuring out what you can do with the excess equipment. And I still put down here out of scope, tech refresh, beachhead equipment, upgrade circuit, application ATOs, authority to operate, network upgrade, server upgrade, OS upgrade, RAM upgrade. So in the scope of my project, I'm not going to upgrade any servers. I'm not going to upgrade operating systems. I'm not going to upgrade any RAM. People sometimes try to get that in there. Oh, in order to move, I need this. That's up to you. That's not part of my project. My project is the physical move. So these are all things you have to keep in mind because it's going to make a difference in whether or not you're successful. And we went through the risks before, and same thing. You can keep refining them, and you'll add more as time goes on until you're ready to fill up your risk registry. Okay, that's E9. Let's look at E10. And what is E10? Now, here's the interesting part. When you've done that, you'll see things you couldn't see otherwise. If I had done this all in Microsoft Project or without the visuals, I wouldn't have realized, wait a second, I've got all the information I need now to make a list of what's moving to X and what's moving to Z. So now, that's what I did. I said, okay, here's my everything moving to X. And now you've got, forget about all the processes, the preparation, everything you've got to buy, everything you've got to do. Now you've got a different focus here. So as you go along in these projects, you'll see these things, and you got to take advantage of them. It's common sense. Here, everything I'm moving to X is under that column. Everything I'm moving to Z is under there. And you've got listed how many racks, how many empty racks, etc. So that's what makes a difference, a huge difference. Once you have that there, so you can, once you've got those bubbles to move around, you can use it any way you want to, right? And come up with these things to make it easier for your project. Now you're going to see how this made it easier because I took this sort of idea and presented it this way rather than in a Microsoft project schedule. And then, as you can see to the right, disposal, identify decommed racks, identify soon-to-be decommissioned racks, decommission equipment disposal procedures, dispose of excess equipment, all another part of the project. But to the left, I've got what's going to one center and what's going to the other center. And soon, I'll show you how I use that. Okay, so we've got, as you can see, in E10, those two lists, essentially, in diagram format with the bubbles of what's going where. And now we've organized it that way, and now we need to get ready for the presentation. So you're going to start meetings maybe 6 months before going over this again and again. Now, I'm going to go a little bit off here and tell you what happened that I also had to add something else. So once we had meetings with the application owners and kept asking, have you planned it out? Have you diagrammed your connections? Have you done all this? And you get yes, I have, yes, I have, yes, I have. Well, I had 2 weeks of that. And then finally, after 2 weeks, I asked, well, can you show me your plan? And no one had one. So one of the things in this case, you have to make sure that, and sometimes you have to force the issue. You have to force people to plan because they all have full-time jobs. They're doing something else. So I actually created a report for each application owner. And in that report, they had to actually name the application, give me a list of the inventory of all the servers, everything that was moving, an inventory of every piece of equipment that they needed to be moved. And we would, of course, when we got that, we went to the data center, the current one, and double-checked that. The power, what power did they need? What were the connections they needed? So they had to put all that in there. And these were embedded Excel spreadsheets within the Word report. And then we had the complete wiring diagram, how everything was connected, another embedded Excel spreadsheet within the report. Their insurance, we were moving it pretty far. Who insured it? How much was it insured for? Security, did they have an authority to operate? All these things that I needed and I needed to make sure that they had planned who was going to be there when we shut down the system. They had to list their personnel. Who was going to be there when we turned on the system, when we put it in place, plugged it in, and turned it on. Who was going to be there to turn the application up, to turn the system up, to turn the power up. So they had to list all that. So they had to figure out way in advance. You imagine during the move, you shut down, and now you're not sure who's supposed to be there for a certain application and who was going to be there to turn it up, and somebody didn't show. So you had in there the folks who were going to turn it down and be at the current data center, the folks who were going to meet you at the new place, and their names, their numbers, their emails, how to get in touch with them, and then a list of their procedures. What were they going to do? So now you've forced people to actually think about the whole process, go through the process with their team, and write it down. Why? Because you required it. It had to be in the report. So now everyone has gone, not only have you got the scope, you got the deliverables, but now for every single thing that was moving, that group of people, the owners of that application, they had written it all down and gone through it with their team. Amazing. So that's, if you can write down the topics of that report, but it's easy to make up. Think of what you're going to need. The servers and the racks are hooked up a certain way at the current location, and whatever plugs they're using, whatever current and voltage they need, it's got to be the same when they get there. So everything has been designated as space at the new location, and you got to go out and check that. So before the move, we'd have all these reports with us, and we'd make sure the right power was in the right slot for where they were going to go. Another quality check you can do. But without that, how the heck are you going to do a quality check? You couldn't. So we did that, and they knew exactly who was going to be there, who was going to hook everything up, how they were going to hook it up, the power had to be right, etc. So that makes a huge difference. Okay, so that's something I don't have here, and if folks ask me for it, I could lay out the template. That's no big deal. Let's get back to the diagram. So now, the next thing you have to do is, like I said, you start meeting 6 months beforehand, right? And you've got to present to people in a way that looks as good, is easy on the eyes and easy to understand. You don't want all these, once you show them a Microsoft project schedule, people don't know what they're looking at. So let's go to P1. So P1 was my first slide, right? And look at what that is. So that is, at Z, certain things that had to be done before we could move in there, and at X, certain things that had to be done. Structured cabling complete. I changed all the dates and everything on here, obviously. Structured cabling complete. Circuit activation. WAN network stand-up begins. WAN network stand-up complete. LAN stand-up. LAN stand-up complete. Switches stand-up start. Completion of circuits activation. Switches stand-up complete. First move. At X, structured cabling complete. Now, sometimes you'll see here there's differences. Something different had to happen at X. Structured cabling complete, and you put, the target date, and then when it's complete during the meeting. So you're having these meetings for 6 months, and when they complete something, you put down complete. They're on the meetings, right? They're telling you, yeah, we finished that. And so as time went on, obviously they were all complete as we kept going. Let's go back to X. Structured cabling complete. WAN network stand-up begins. Telecom coordination for backbone. WAN network stand-up complete. LAN stand-up. LAN stand-up complete. Security stand-up start. Security stand-up complete. Command center stand-up start. Command center stand-up complete. Fourth move. So every single week, this was the first page of a PowerPoint presentation. Let's close that. Let's go to P2, and this is the most interesting one. So this is only one page. Right? So for all the moves, I believe we had 12, 13 moves and started at move 1. Look at how easy on the eyes this is. So X is where it's going, and so move 8 is to data center X on this date. We're moving 8 racks, and these are the applications that are moving. Obviously, they were written out. I made all these numbers up and letters. ESU, F6T, K110, M13M, P16J. These are the ones that were moving. So every week for 6 months, all the folks, all the stakeholders were on the meeting, and you reviewed this. And believe it or not, I think within 3 months or 2 months, some of this changed. No, we can't move before this moves. We can't do this. They didn't figure it out right away. But after seeing this every week, they figured out, oh, wow, we can't move until this system's in place. And we changed it around. By the time the move started, all this was set in concrete. Look at move 9. It's going to X, and the ones that were going to Z were labeled like that. 418, 9 racks, these are the 2 systems. And this was in front of them every single week. So think about this. So there's two moves on this one slide. Some of the moves were on one slide. So move 1, move 2, move 3, move 4. This is the way they saw it. They didn't see it in a Microsoft schedule where they're not sure what's going on. This is clear. Move 8. Oh, my system's moving on move 8. Foxtrot 6 Tango, the second one down. Okay. They think about it. They ask questions. As the date changed, I can't be there on this date. I'm at a wedding. Can we move it? Yeah, sure. We can move it. If you're doing this months in advance, you can easily move it. So look at how easy this is on the eyes. Look at how easy it is to understand. I'm in move 8. Foxtrot 6 Tango is my application. I'm move 8, and there's the date I'm moving. Easy. It's a lot easier than seeing in Microsoft Project. So you may use Microsoft Project to help schedule, the predecessors and the task and all that if you need to get that deep into it. But to present it, it's got to be something simple, something they can understand. And this works great. So you got to do the work. But in PowerPoint, it's easy. I picked these, out of one of the designs, and I've used other designs, and that was it. Okay, let's close that and go to P3. So click on P3. So P3 ended up, after all those move slides, 12, 13 of them, I forget exactly how many, and now these were notes. Now these notes started as one page, and I ended up with 3 different slides of notes. Why? Because you want to go over these notes every single meeting, and I just read them one after the other. So you don't end up with someone saying those famous words, oh, that's the first I heard of that. So they don't listen the whole time, or they don't take any action. And if you don't have something like this where you're repeating it every meeting and it's in writing, you'll hear that. Oh, it's the first I heard of that. In other words, it's your fault, project manager. First time I heard of this, I should have been told this long ago. So here we went down these meetings, and every time we added some more rules and other things that they had to abide by, we ended up with 3 different slides like this. Let's look at one. Each system vendor will be available at the destination to repair any system that has problems. The hosting and moving company has been tasked with coordinating this and is responsible to pay for repairs of any equipment that does not power up. All right. So if something broke during the move, the vendor took the responsibility and had folks there to fix it. The owner's warranty maintenance agreement, too, that is currently in place will take over after the owner's sign-off that their equipment is operational at the destination. So we put the equipment in place, they turn it up, they chuck it, everything. Okay, so now their warranty's in place, so now the vendor is no longer responsible. 3, if system has a failover, system owner will execute failover before it's shut down at the current location. I just blacked that out. 4, if the system has no failover, system owner will do a backup before it is shut down at current location. 5, system owner has contracted with its OEMs to plan a restore from a backup. 6, all communication with associated vendors have been executed by the system owners to coordinate the restoration of systems from a backup. 7, all required system owners personnel will be present at the destination to execute a restore from a backup. These are critical systems for a company or an agency, so everyone needs to know what their responsibility is. And if you go over it every meeting and you keep listing them as you go on, like I say, it started off with 1 page. I think it started off with 4, maybe up to 4. Then we added 5, 6, 7. It kept going until we had 3 pages. Okay, 8. All required documentation that is needed to do a restore from a backup has been gathered by the system owners and noted in their migration plan. And the migration plan with the plan I told you about earlier, right? Where they had to write down how they're going to hook up, what power they needed, how much it was insured for, etc. Now, keep in mind, I'll give you another example of one of the notes that was added at the end here that we went over. After we started moving, we saw that people were bringing drinks and food into the data center, and it's not allowed. So we had to tell them, you can't go out there. There's a place, a snacks area out there. You can't. Of course, people get upset. But now, as soon as we found that out the first time, the next meetings that we had, and we had a meeting once a week, even, every move, we moved, finished those folks. We met again with the rest of the folks, and now we put it in the notes. No food or drink allowed in data center. So you can keep adding things as you go along to make things easier for you. So that was one of the notes that we had in there as well. So let's look at this as a whole, right? You figured out what the scope was. Everybody was involved. All their systems were notated. Everybody's defining each one of those bubbles. You defined all the deliverables in the WBS. Then you did a quality check between the two. Then when you were done with that, of course, the stakeholder list is updated. How else are you going to figure out who to talk to for the scope? So you did that first. So now you did the quality check between the scope diagram and the work breakdown structure. And now you open up another tab in Visio, copy everything in the scope, and now paste it in that tab, and now move it under the increment or the build it should be under in the project. And like I said, it's neat. It's, you click on one, you move it to one build or the next build. It's easy to do. Think about how hard it would be to retype all this stuff. Oh, no, that doesn't go there. You got to cut it. You got to paste it, put it someplace else. And it's not as visual. It's harder to see. It's harder for people to understand. When it's in those bubbles under those, it's easier to move around. It's like move around a block. It's just makes it a lot easier for folks to think about. So once you did all that, then we're able to say, hey, we know what systems are going where. Let's make another 2 columns, which systems go to which data center. And then from there, we made the moves. It was so simple. It made it so simple because most of it was visual. It's easy to take the visual and make it into a PowerPoint presentation where, oh, here's move 1. What's in move 1? Oh, here. They're right here in the second tab of the Visio scope, and we write them down. And you could even copy the copy and paste. You don't even have to type it again. And so then you start having the meetings. Hey, these are the things that have to be completed at the data centers. Here's the moves. And those moves the people see over and over again. And if they want to change, they find out on that particular date. They don't have to worry about another system being moved first or any other events. So let's say they have something come up. My brother's getting married that week, and this is the date you were going to move my system. I can't be there. Okay, we'll change it. But you can only do that if they're seeing it all the time. And the best way to see it is in a diagram format like that or a nice PowerPoint presentation rather than something cryptic. So that's exactly how that data center was moved. But again, I've used it on all projects. And remember, the key here is this allows people to discuss every bit, every piece, everything in the scope, every deliverable. And it's written down and defined over and over again. Everybody's on the same page. Everybody has the same understanding. They all feel part of the team. They all feel like they have added something. They've contributed something. It makes a great project team. It makes a great project. And this is a great way to be successful. So hopefully, if you've got any questions, again, just go to the Twitter site and at PM Hardcore, PM HARDCORPS. And if you follow me, I'll follow you, and you can ask questions that way. So that's the end of episode 5. And the next episode, we're going to talk about leadership and how to hold meetings and how to have a core team and a larger team, etc. I hope you all had a great week this week. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll talk to you all soon. Take care.